Hey, hope you guys been doing well. This is Jeff here. I got another interesting one that I wanted to talk about today. And today I want to talk about my career journey from end to end and talk about all the different roles and stages that I've been through all the way up until this point. Another way to put it is the timeline of my career all the way from the beginning. I figured this would be an interesting one to make. I recently saw a video that a gentleman did something very similar and just personally felt like it was pretty inspirational overall, and just hearing their trajectory and what they've gone through was just nice to be able to see someone else's journey. And I think having that transparency alone is a rare thing in today's day and age, especially hearing a realistic and honest career trajectory was just very valuable. And for me personally, I'm hoping just to be able to provide that same through this video and be able to provide you a little bit of motivation especially if you're in any of the stages of starting out your career or looking for a new role or in a current role or trying to break out into something different, right? And so I hope you find this video helpful. And as somebody that has a very, I guess, unconventional career journey, I'm hoping that at the very least, this will be an interesting story for you to hear. And I hope you enjoy this. Okay, this story really starts junior year of college. Junior year of college, I really start diving into iOS app development on the iPhone, right? And I was really into coding at that time. Something that I've always wanted to do, but unfortunately for myself, I was already a junior and I definitely was not majoring in computer science. What I started to do was I basically bought a Mac Mini and I started doing coding on the side and learning what I can. Especially with somebody with like the bad grades that I had, I was no star student or anything like that. I knew that finishing and after college was going to be a difficult time. And that's when I actively pursued my journey in software engineering. Started teaching myself coding, learning app development, but my progress was extremely slow. Barely could make any sort of momentum. My fundamentals were not there. And so one day I had the bright idea to go talk to my counselor and go to the computer science department at my school and talk to my counselor about what I can do to try to get into the field or switch majors or whatever it may be to be able to continue my coding journey. I promise this section sounds unrelated, but this part actually leads me into my very first sort of real world, I guess, big boy interview type scenario. I ended up sitting down with a computer science professor that was also a counselor, and he actually right away listens to my scenario and tells me to actually not go to school, come back to school, just because I was already so close in my STEM degree. Even though my grades weren't great, he mentioned that I should do something called a coding boot camp. This is the first time I ever heard of something like this in my life. Being from Oregon, coding boot camps aren't something that you're very familiar with, right? It's not really something that's that popular. And so that's when I started going down the rabbit hole of how to get into one of these things. Some of you guys don't know, you actually have to study and test into one of them. And so at the time, being a stupid college kid, I thought I could just get into one during that summertime leading into my senior year. And so that's what I do. During that summer of junior year, I was taking courses and I was switched to JavaScript. That's the language that they were asking for. I try to study. I spent about 2-3 months, thought I was going to be good. Keep in mind the test to get in, if you're a beginner, I wouldn't say it's easy. Looking back, I wouldn't say it's hard, right? I put on a suit and tie, go down to San Francisco, go down to the Hack Reactor office. And if you know anything about tech, wearing a suit and tie is kind of you really stand out if you do that right. And so I walk into this building, everybody's in shorts, sweatpants, sandals, that kind of thing. I'm in there and I think this is going to be like my big break or something like that, right? And of course, I completely bomb it. I bomb it so badly to the point that there was like a pre-question, a warm-up question before the real question. And it was literally like writing your name in an IDE, or I guess if you don't know anything about programming, a text editor. And I couldn't even get past the first 2 points, right? And I bomb it. I was there for like maybe 10 minutes max, spent all that money flying to San Francisco, got a hotel, defeated. They told me at the end, of course, I got rejected really badly. They told me I couldn't apply for another year or 6 months or something like that. And that's the trajectory after that, right? And go back to college, go back to Oregon, go back to college, and start my senior year and continue to just learn on the side. But again, because I wasn't the brightest student in general, I was just barely keeping up with my grades. And so a lot of the time spent was working on my coursework. But I did take a couple electives in computer science and like very basic Python classes. And I always had that in the back of my mind and a target that I wanted to approach once I finished a university. My university ends, my senior year is over. By the time I finish, I had no internships, no real work experience, only small work study jobs and just basic like desk jobs or labor jobs to be able to get some money to support myself throughout college. Of course, I moved to San Francisco because I wanted to pursue my programming journey, and I started applying to jobs. I figured with my STEM degree, I did a lot of math. I would try to get maybe some data and analysis job, low-level data cleanup, anything that can get me in the door, maybe use some SQL or something like that. Anything that can get me into the door. At the time, I sold all my Nike Jordan collection. That's a really big thing in Oregon, being the home of Nike. And I got some cash, and I basically stayed at various family, friends of friends apartments with cheap rent, and applied to jobs every single day. I took the BART to downtown San Francisco, used the Metreon, if it's like basically like a big food hall, used the Wi-Fi there, and I applied to jobs every single day. And I did get some hits on that first job search. I did get some hits. Notable ones are Amazon and Google, both for like data cleanup roles. Thought it was my big break, but of course bombed both those interviews along with all the other ones as well. In the end, I probably applied to about 1,000 or so jobs and didn't get a single offer from anywhere from startups to big companies. Tech just was not having me. As my money was running low, I decided to open up my job search and just take what I can. I figured if my best chance was just to be able to stay in the Bay Area, be near the action, and continue to learn how to program and be able to sustain myself. So I ended up opening up my job search, just mass applying, and I ended up applying for a commercial roofing company. And this commercial roofing company, at the time, I actually applied to like a sales manager sort of role. But when I showed up to the interview, I went in there, and the gentleman that spoke with me right away told me that, hey, if I gave you this role, you'd bomb it right away and you're not going to end up succeeding. So I have this other role for you. And the role that I ended up getting was basically a job that was one step above being a full-time physical laborer, roofing laborer. And the job that I had was actually to do small repairs, be the first one on site at commercial buildings, do estimations and assessments, patchwork, that kind of stuff on roofing. And there I go. It was the only offer that I got. So I ended up taking the role, and my journey in learning how to become a roofer and learning the trade of roofing officially begins. I started working that job. It was no joke. I learned a ton. I commuted every single day in the East Bay throughout all of Northern California. And my programming dreams haven't died yet. And after being able to get my kind of footing at the job, I started my programming journey again. And what I mean by that is that I basically try to build like a self-paced, self-taught curriculum for myself, where I did all the online classes, paid for some self-paced courses, read all the books, and then also, of course, just did practice problems and a lot of YouTube at the time. And after, it was a 9-to-5 job, so that gave me a lot of time afterwards, from probably 5:30 to 10 o'clock to be able to study. And so I did that for probably for about a year and a half straight. Of course, it took a lot of motivation, and I guess had a lot of highs and lows, right? There was days where I was stuck on topics for months on end, and it was really hard to push through those days. But ultimately, my day in and day out looked like going to my job, my blue collar job, bringing a change of clothes with me every single day, and finding where a local library was, or a school or public space that I can study. And so I got really good at finding coffee shops wherever my job site was near. I would intentionally not drive home yet after work because it was just much easier to find a coffee shop or go to a local public university or college. I went to Cal State East Bay a lot. The job was in the East Bay. And I'd go there, weigh out the traffic, grab a snack, change out of my steel toe boots and my construction clothes, and just pretend like I was a student wherever I could go. After about a year or so in of that study plan, I was probably averaging 4 times a week on average. And on the weekends, I also did this as well. But on the weekends, I had a little bit more flexibility and I actually went to Berkeley a lot and went to the public spaces at the Berkeley University because I was living in Oakland to do a lot of studying. So very familiar with that library as well. After about a year, my progress was so slow. I was barely trickling and I realized that I need to do something else. If not, I was going to end up having to just continue working my construction job for even longer. Although it was a great job and I was learning a lot, and my social life was also building in the Bay Area at that time, things were just not moving in the direction that I wanted them to go. And so I started revisiting the idea of getting into a boot camp. I started looking at getting back into a boot camp, and luckily for me, during that time, they actually just released their first kind of prep course program. So for the first time ever, I actually got a little bit of structure in what I should be learning, how I should be targeting the topics. And I went through that curriculum, probably took me another 4 months to finish that. And unlucky for me, still took me 3 attempts to be able to get into the boot camp. That kind of gives you a gauge as to career-wise how good I was at programming. At that point, I was 2 years into being like doing the self-taught thing, starting from college to really going hardcore during my construction working days, and then also trying to do this prep course, but still bombed it twice. I don't even know. I was just a really bad programmer at that time, right? And on the very third time when I got in, this was like a moment that I'll never forget. I remember waking up at 8 a.m., looking at my phone before going to work, and looking at my phone on a Friday before going to work, and I just saw the email that I was finally accepted. And I kid you not, I literally shed a tear. I shed a tear during that period, and just because of the joy of happiness that I got from simply getting into the boot camp. And I just thought back about all the moments that I had and how far I come up to that point. It was the first ever signal or sign or any sort of success that I got in the programming world, and even any sort of acknowledgement, right? Like at that point, I don't think anybody even knew, outside of like my close friends and family, knew that I was like in program trying to learn how to code. So first, a little bit of acknowledgement, thought back on all the days I struggled at the library, grimy from a construction site, sitting at a desk at a random library, not knowing anybody, just plugging away, learning basic programming skills. I realized how far I come at that point. And funny thing is that before you can actually start the boot camp, at least for me doing Hack Reactor, there's actually a prep course, and the prep course is advertised as about 100 hours of prep work. And for most people, they have probably a couple months to do that. Because I got rejected twice before I got in, I only had about 2 to 3 weeks to do this prep course. So immediately I quit my job. I did my prep course. I remember staying up till 3 a.m. for weeks straight on end, 5 a.m. trying to finish this. Because I was so poor at programming, it probably took me about 200 hours, if not more, to be able to finish this in like the 2.5 weeks that I was given probably for the prep course. So luckily I submitted on the very, very last day, and on I go. Finally made it through. I got green checks on my prep work, and I was officially a student at an unaccredited institution, paying the $20,000 tuition back as a student. And so there's the big pivotal shift for myself. The first time ever I felt like I took an exit on the highway, and finally took that exit going a different direction. The boot camp itself was an incredible experience for me. It was on site. It was 3 months long, probably 12, 15-hour days, 6 days a week. And I decided to give up my apartment in Oakland that was in someone's house, just a bedroom in someone's house, and then ended up moving in with my sister in San Francisco, just so I didn't have to make that commute from Oakland. Amazing experience. And afterwards, finishing up the boot camp in 3 months was then, of course, my first official software engineering job search. My first ever job search from end to end took about 6 months' time. And I had a really strict schedule with some of the buddies that I met at the boot camp. Luckily enough to be able to have that. And so we didn't let up on the gas at all. If anything, the boot camp was almost just, it brought us to a certain space. It brought us to level 2, for example. And I, like, in my head, I was like, man, I need to continue just to get better. Just because I started at that point, I was like proficient enough to be able to make some things, but I still saw all the gaps and lack of knowledge that I had. And we had a really strict schedule. We would get together every day, do probably 30, 40, 50 job applications, take our interviews that we had every single day. And then that's where we started doing prep questions as well. If you aren't a software engineer, just for a little bit of background, I'm going to talk about this quite a bit, but there's a lot of prep work to get in and interview for these software jobs. There's something called the algorithm, or otherwise known as like leak code, toy problems that we have to all do to get a lot of, especially the entry level jobs. They're just small bits and components and puzzle problems that you have to be able to solve that are universal throughout the industry. And they're fundamental topics. And most people end up spending months to be able to master these topics and go through the interview process. These are difficult questions, especially when you're starting out. And unfortunately for me, I was so far behind in this kind of process that even though I was studying and probably end up doing about 100 problems at that time, I never was able to get past just doing the very easy problems. Like I think by the time I got a job, I could barely do some of the easier basic problems that to be honest, probably someone sophomore year of college would have learned and been able to do. And so there I go. I probably ended up getting about 50 job interviews at that time. I bombed pretty much every single one of them. I got close on some of them. Out of the 50, I probably end up getting 10 or so, maybe 7 on-sites, and then maybe 10 or so phone screens. And I ended up only landing 1 offer. And by the time I finished, I probably applied to over 2,000 jobs, something around there. So you can do the math. The ratio was not good. I did some networking, but that didn't really lead me anywhere. I did get some interviews out of those as well, but I think my main thing was just like blasting out job applications, like really scraping the bottom of the barrel if possible, just to try to get my foot in the door. I ended up getting 1 offer, and this is my first big break that I've ever gotten personally in my life. And believe it or not, my first job was actually a senior software engineer role at a major retail company. Think like a Macy's, Walmart type of company. And my role there was a front end web facing job, but also with the back end, which is like the servers, databases, all that good jazz. And I ended up, of course, accepting the role as my only offer that I got. And on I go. Finally completed my job search after about 6 months. Another notable thing that I had during that period was that we also did a hackathon during that period, and we actually ended up winning a hackathon. And I guess to describe those 6 months of looking for that job search, it was just pushing ourselves, not letting up on the gas after finishing the boot camp, and then just throwing things in the wall, whatever events that we could get to, whatever things we could do to just improve our skills. Whoever's down to keep on studying could join, and we just kept on going. And there goes that phase of the job search. Okay, so I start my job. This job was no joke. A senior level role at a large retail company. I would say that probably transitions to more of like maybe a mid-level job if I worked in a FANG company or a big tech. But either way, I hit the ground running. There was not too much onboarding or learning. They gave me the tech stack, and luckily for me, the tech stack was actually really old school tech stack because how old the company was. I worked on Angular 1.2. If you don't know what that is, it's a web facing framework to help build websites, and 1.2 is extremely old. This was like just a few years ago, and 1.2 was probably released in 2008, something like that. And had a great, man, it was an amazing job, only because I hit the ground running so fast, and because the tech was so old school, it forced me to really learn and hone down my fundamental skills for full stack web development. Mainly because on the front end, it was like I had to just really learn my HTML, CSS, jQuery, if we remember that, to be able to make anything on the screen. And also our servers were actually on-prem. And so I learned a ton about how to deploy code onto on-prem versus the cloud. And we had a cloud migration at that time. Went through the process of that, but that old school infrastructure really brought my skills up, along with my veteran team members that's been there for 20 plus years. They pushed me and things were fast paced and I learned a ton. In the end, the company wasn't doing well. I ended up making it through 4 rounds of layoffs. The company filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy. So I went through a bankruptcy with them as well without getting laid off. And then they went through an acquisition at the end to survive all that in the end. I ended up being at this job for probably about two and a half, almost 3 years there or so. And about a year and a half in, I actually got a reach out from Google. And so I knew for a fact that I wasn't going to be able to successfully land that job, but I knew that I needed to start preparing. Although this was a great job, just by how bad the company was doing at the end there, I knew that my time was going to come to an end, and I knew that eventually I had to prepare for my next role. So luckily for myself, I thought of this super maybe dumb idea at that time, but I decided not to take my Google interview for 9 months out. And I figured that would give me the leeway and the timeline to be able to study up on those, as I mentioned earlier, those fundamental questions, the algorithm questions that I needed to do to be able to pass that interview. Luckily for myself, during that entire time, another part of that story is that job was actually in San Jose on site, and I was living in San Francisco at that time. Actually, I had 2 other friends from the boot camp that also got jobs in San Jose, and I think a lot of us felt like frauds, especially myself, felt like a fraud holding down a senior level job with 1 year of experience out of a boot camp. Although my skills were getting better, we decided to still not let up on the gas, and we continued to go to coffee shops, libraries, each other's offices at that time after work, just because the commute was so long anyways, to kill time, but just to be able to improve my skills. And during that period of time is when I really dove into those algorithm questions. In the end, I probably did about 500 to 700 of the problems, and I was well on my way to be able to start doing better on the interview process the second time around. I started my job search probably a year and a half in to my job, especially because of all the layoffs. I was like, I need to find a new job, but it took me an absolutely crazy long time to get that, to find and get offers. This second job search, I probably bombed about probably another 2,000, if not more, job applications. But this time around, I was getting tons of feedback and reviews, and I was going in for tons of on-sites, that kind of stuff, but wasn't able to successfully land anything. However, out of nowhere, out of the blue, towards the end of the job search, after applying to all those jobs, out of nowhere, I feel like my skills really honed in, and I got 3 offers back to back, like literally within the 3 weeks. All 3 offers were from major, large, well-known tech companies that had stocks, large pay, bonuses, all that good stuff, like the big boy jobs that most people could dream of when they think about working in tech. And the odd thing about this is that I had a weird scenario where all 3 job positions were at different levels. One of the jobs there's some interviews for these jobs that you don't actually go on to a team when you interview in front of a panel. You do like a 5-6 session interview panel, and then it's like a team matching scenario. For that scenario, I actually only got an offer for an entry level job, which is crazy at the time, right? I tried to negotiate a higher leveling, but they weren't down, and it was for your traditional big tech company. And after that, the other 2 offers that I got was actually a senior level offer, but that was a great thing. That was my highest paid offer there. And then lastly, I got a mid-level offer, which is actually the company that I'm still at today. So, as you can see, I ended up taking a down level. I took a down level back to the mid-level, and it was a hard decision because I had an offer on the table that was significantly more than the mid-level offer. But the people that I interviewed with, the team that I was on, and just the overall trajectory of the company as well, just being able to weigh which company I think the stocks will end up going up at, I ended up picking this one. And ultimately, that's where I'm at now. And I personally feel like I made a great choice in making that decision. But at the time, it was difficult giving up money up front to take something that can potentially be to be bigger. Okay, this kind of part comes into the journey and the part where I feel like I had a big ego hit, right? And of course, being so like new into the community, having that senior title, down leveling back, it was a big kind of ego hit, and something that I really cared for at the time a lot was being able to get my title back, right? And not because I wanted the money, that kind of thing. I just, for myself, it was just really important to be able to prove to myself that I was coding at that level, and I just wanted to be able to make that checkbox and mental kind of growth for myself. And so going through the grind of that, ended up taking me about a year and a half to get my senior title back. And I was confident in myself that I could do it, but it did take me a couple review cycles to be able to get that back. After getting senior title, I was finally in uncharted territory, and that uncharted territory was working towards trying to get tech lead, staff software engineer, that kind of leveling at this big tech company that I'm still currently at. In the end, I grinded through that as well. That took me probably about another 2.5 years to be able to make that leveling. And all in all, I've been at my company now for about 5 years, still at the staff like tech lead level right now at this point. Okay, to basically give a nice little overview, that's the end of the journey here and where I'm at now. Of course, nowhere near the finish. Still have a lot of career to go and looking forward to what there is in the future. I'm really happy as an IC, so I'll probably continue that path, keep on going as an architect or try to be a principal, something like that. But you never know where life takes you, right? Overall, I think I probably applied to about 5,000 jobs throughout the years. I probably did well around 800 leak code problems and still struggle with some of the hard ones, right? I think I could probably get an easy one on average, maybe, or a medium question, maybe on average, pass maybe 50, maybe 60% of the questioning on a good day. So I by no means am a master at those problems still yet, but have made a lot of improvements. Overall, right, it's been a really extremely rewarding journey. And looking back, each one of the components has its ups and downs and stories within stories for each one of the phases. But one thing I'm really proud about during this journey was never letting up until I really landed that big tech job. And I know a lot of folks feel like, looking back, I had a really early recognition that easy path, or that maybe not even easy, but for myself, I just never felt like it came easy. And so I kept on putting in work. And of course, one of the really proud things that I'm proud of is being able to build my community and having all those times after work just studying and putting in the effort to hone in my programming skills, and something I think back on and really grateful that I put in the hours and was able to have those times to be able to do that. All right, overall, that's the end of that story. I think I realized that one of the big lessons that I think I learned out of this is that in no ways am I like smart or a genius or some sort of exceptional programmer. I think I recognized that really early on, and I think to be able to pursue the goal and dream and passion that I have for programming, I really just embraced the journey of being able to take the time to put in the effort to grind through the different stages and challenges that was needed to get to the space that I'm in now. And I think in the end, that was like the most rewarding part about this whole thing. And I hope that helps. I hope that was a meaningful story, and love to hear from you if you have anything for me on any of the components. If not, I'll talk to you on the next one. Latest.